Turning now to the race for the White House, the Republican field of candidates is growing. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott is expected to formally announce his candidacy this morning after waiting for months. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to announce his run at some point later this week. So what are some of the big headlines and key takeaways from the campaign trail? For that insight and analysis on the state of the race this morning, let's turn to Associate Editor at The Hill, Niall Stanage. Niall, good morning. I have to talk about your piece that dropped yesterday on The Hill. You're talking about 5 questions for Ron DeSantis. One of them I have to ask you about in your reporting is about Mr. DeSantis. What has taken him so long to possibly throw his hat into the ring?
Well, there are a couple of reasons, I think, for the delay, Nick. One is there is actually, or was, a law in Florida that made it difficult for state office holders to seek federal office. But the other thing is that Ron DeSantis has just been waiting and waiting, trying to delay as long as possible while running a kind of shadow campaign. So I think he's been happy to do that. He's been supported by a super PAC while doing that. And that's why it has taken him so long.
Now, I have the advantage of having spoken with you this past week while you were here. You were talking about that shadow campaign. There's an advantage to that. Why is that? Break that down for our viewers.
Basically, because there are certain regulations in terms of spending and raising money that kick in when you fully declare a presidential candidacy. That is not the case when you're doing what Governor DeSantis has been doing for the past few months. And in fact, the reason that is precipitating this likely official launch this week is because he's having a meeting with donors in Miami Wednesday and Thursday. And it is expected they will be asked to raise money for a presidential campaign. Obviously, you can't do that without filing the necessary paperwork.
Now, DeSantis is likely the biggest threat for former President Donald Trump for the nomination. How aggressively do you think he'll go after the former president, which everyone says he's going to need to do if he wants to actually draw a distinction between the two of them?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, clearly in national polls right now, former President Trump is leading by roughly a 2-to-1 margin. So clearly Governor DeSantis is going to have to go after him more aggressively. He's going to have to throw some punches. We're already seeing the beginnings of that kind of strategy, Nick. I mean, for example, Governor DeSantis was recently criticizing the former president for not being clear enough, in DeSantis's opinion, about where he stands on abortion. So those are the kind of attacks that we're seeing ramping up, but I think it's going to have to get more aggressive as time goes on, given, of course, that the former president is attacking Governor DeSantis in pretty blunt terms already, as is his tendency.
Now, I have one more DeSantis question for you, and then I want to move on to Senator Tim Scott, who is expected to announce today. With Governor DeSantis, has he been successful in waging these culture wars, and do you believe that will be successful on the national stage?
He has been successful in terms of using those kinds of issues to really make himself a national figure. And we see that in everything from LGBTQ rights to the battle you were just referring to over the African American Studies course that he criticized. Now, that has made him a big player in conservative politics and in conservative media. The larger question is, do any of those things become drags or millstones in a national general election? And I think that's the fear. We're already seeing some donors express concern about some of these positions, worrying that they would render Governor DeSantis unelectable if he did become.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation in your cable lineup. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-based, unbiased coverage.